His name struck fear into the hearts of every opponent, no matter how tough they thought they were. He played only 58 games, but everyone knew Ricky McLean and knew to be careful in his vicinity. Welcome, Ricky. Were you that scary?
Oh, I never really thought so, Mike.
Your mates did?
Yeah, possibly. But I never had that thought about myself, to be honest.
You liked it physical, though, didn't you? You enjoyed the footy of the late 60s and early 70s.
Yes, I did. I often reflect on that now in everyday life, where I miss out on the physicality of, there is a release in that, playing a team sport and playing a hard sport. I really did relish that, loved it.
An intriguing career. I mean, you started at Carlton, where your father, Rod, was famous. He played in 2 Premiership teams and was chairman and selectors under Ron Barassi. You were there for 6 seasons and played 19 games. Did they treat you fairly?
I wished I'd have dealt with things better.
Like?
Well, I wished I'd have had a better understanding about, where you can exert your energies, and where you can be more positive about things. But I also balanced that by saying I was only a young lad, and I think a mentor would have helped me greatly. I was possibly my own worst enemy at times.
But you had a father that went through the system. Not only did he play at Carlton, but he was a celebrated Carlton player, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
Did you not listen to him?
I think like a lot of people in my era, the men were really hard. The fathers of my friends were really hard. And I think we had that relationship. It was unbelievably fair, but you had to earn your own stripes. So from a mentoring role, I would say, he didn't tick that box, but he was of that era where you were thrown in the deep end and you fended for yourself.
So he was tough, and your first coach at Carlton was Ron Barassi, and he was tougher. You didn't like Barassi, did you?
Oh, I love him as a person.
Do you?
Yes.
Didn't you have a fight with him?
Yeah, I did. I had a couple of run-ins with Barassi. I think I was 16, maybe 17. An intra-club practice match, and Barassi was actually the umpire. That was about, I think, a week or 2 before the season started, and the possibles and the probables. And I was playing on a pretty gifted player called John Gould. Halfway through one of the quarters, he did something he shouldn't have done, and to me,
yep.
And I turned around and whacked him. And within a minute, Barassi was over there going crook at me, so I took my Guernsey off and told him what to do with the Guernsey. And
so you're 16 at this time?
Yeah, I would have been 16 or 17, and I was pretty upset because of the circumstances.
So tell us what Gouldy did.
Oh, he grabbed me in the crutch area, and that didn't go down too well with me.
No, that makes him the provocateur. I accept that, yeah.
And the good thing about it was he was trying to explain that to Barassi too, which I thought was good of him.
Yep.
But it amounted to me being, made out to be the bad guy and leaving in, pretty poor circumstances.
Your second altercation with the great Ronald Dale Barassi was the fisticuffs, wasn't it?
Well, you could probably say that, but for Carlton to keep me there, they somehow thought that if they made me captain of the reserves, it'd be an honour that I'd like. But it wasn't, but I accepted it anyway.
What age were you then?
Anyway, I would have been 19, I imagine, 20 years
Captain
ago.
of reserves at 19?
Yeah. And I took my responsibilities, particularly to teammates, very seriously, and, felt as though that I was their protector. At halftime, the Carlton senior players used to meet in the rooms, and we came in at halftime this day, and just prior to that, one of our players, it looked pretty bad what he did. He put his head down and didn't go for the ball, and it was I won't mention the chap's name, but he had long hair, but he was only a youngster. And we came back in, sat down around the bench, and Barassi approached him, and I was sitting alongside this young bloke, and Barassi approached him, and the young boy had his head down. I can still see it now. And Barassi grabbed him by the back of the hair and pulled his head back and said something like, "When I'm talking to you, you look at me." And I jumped up, and I don't know whether I pushed him or hit him over. And I said, "Don't, do that to anyone of my teammates."
Now let's get this. So you punched him, didn't you?
Oh, I think it was more of a... well, it certainly wasn't a punch, Mike, but it was more of a push and an action like a punch. I was just... livid that he would see that was okay.
And what was the upshot of that?
Well, I played on there, but there was never a great relationship between Ron and myself.
I was at a Tommy Hafey Club function last year, at which you spoke, and I remember being jolted by your admission that you couldn't wait to get out of the place that had been steeped in tradition for the McLean family. You couldn't wait to leave it.
Well, perhaps the best way to explain it, when I finally got the opportunity to go somewhere else, I can remember it clearly, Graham Richmond making inquiries and then the clearance going through. And I walked into the Richmond football rooms back in 1972.
Yep.
First night at training, parked my bag under the bench, walked into the doctor's room there, met the doc, and I said something like, "Gee, I feel as though I'm home."
Yeah.
And Barry Richardson was there in the room, first time I'd met him, and I just felt as though I was home.
That last year at Carlton, you played 7 games and kicked 21 goals, including 7 against North Melbourne. Did you play on David Dench that day?
Yes, I did.
Wow. And they still let you go after form like that?
It's there.
I had a couple of days out, Mike, and I could play, obviously. That was and I had great respect for David Dench too, and I'm not blowing, my own bags here, but I used to set up on some people to do well. He was a great fullback. He was tough, relentless, and it was something I'd set myself to do, and I was very proud of that. But I think I was probably out of the side the next week or the week
Amazing.
after.
What sort of? I remember you. Tell me if I get this wrong. You were big, bulky, long blonde hair. I thought your hands were pretty good, but you weren't a leaper, and you're a good left foot kick.
Yes. I had very strong hands.
Yep.
And my accuracy, even though I've never looked at the records, I was a terribly good kick, long kick, very accurate. I could leap. Got a couple of nice mementos. You must have been there that day. Yeah.
Now you end up at Richmond in 1972. It was an amazing year for you, wasn't it? 50 plus goals, you play in the grand final. You suddenly gone from a bit player at Carlton to being an established player at the best club in the competition.
Opportunity.
Yeah. And I know you had massive faith in Tommy Hafey, didn't you?
Of course. I think anybody that gets an opportunity, whatever they do, Mike, in business, or if someone shows some faith, if you are that sort of person that has those rules and about yourself, you acknowledge that and you do your best. And Tommy was a great influence on my life.
Grand final day 1972. It was the record number of goals in a grand final that day. You're playing for the Tigers. You leave the rooms, run up the race, you get onto the ground, you grab the back of your leg. What happened?
Well, running down the race, Mike, as it was then.
Or down, yeah.
And running down has always been difficult for me, whereas you run up, you know where you're putting your feet, and I obviously put my foot in the wrong place or hit the back of my heel, and my hamstring went when I flattened out and went on the ground.
So when you say went, you strained it, you didn't tear it?
No, I didn't tear it, but I struggled that week with the hamstring anyway, so it was another strain and I couldn't extend.
Wow.
I still wrestle whether I should have told Tommy or not, but...
You didn't tell him?
No.
You're at Carlton in 1968 and 1970. They win flags, you're not part of it. You're at Richmond in 72 and playing a losing grand final, and then you take yourself away in 73 and they win 73 and 74. You weren't far away, were you? No premierships, but 4 around you.
Yes. Well, look, I would love to play in a premiership, Mike, obviously. And I don't say this lightly. I think I got as much pleasure out of my game than anyone. And I feel sorry for some of my contemporaries who did all of those things and they're not in a good space.
Really?
Yeah, I do. I feel.
What do you mean they haven't adjusted to life post-footy?
Yeah, well, post-footy, injuries and just how life's gone for them. And I think the balance in life that I had then, the reality of life then was that I had to do something. And I started a business that it's 40 years old this year.
11 years in the system, Ricky, for 58 games. Were they too scared to delist you, were they? I mean, it's a long time. It wouldn't sit today, would it?
I must have shown some promise somewhere, Mike, I guess. If I could perhaps say one thing about myself, I was a great club man, great teammate, and I feel very very proud about that to this day, and I think that counts for a lot. I think enthusiasm and, you know, this feel good, and I'm sure I took that onto the ground for my teammates.
There were a few defenders, Rick, that weren't all that comfortable when they saw R. McLean and N. Balm heading for their area, were they? I mean, Barry Richards has told me that he could actually almost see the fear in the faces of blokes that you were going to be playing on.
I don't know whether we ever saw it that way, but...
Lou Richards christened you and Barmy Biff and Bam?
He did. He did. Yes.
Do you believe Barmy was has got such a reputation for being such a brutal man?
Yeah, well, I was just thinking that when I look at he did have a baby face, didn't he?
Yeah.
Well, I've always said this about Barmy. It wasn't his nature, you know, but I guess, you know, without sounding too dramatic in the battlefield, well, you know, you do what you do. But he wasn't a fighter, you know, and I've said that to other people, but he never took a backward step.
Can you understand the Carlton blokes not accepting that view of Neil Balm?
Well, the Southby incident probably embedded that in their mind.
What did you think of that, Rick? What did you think of what happened that day?
I just think he connected. I can still see it now. It was a round arm. It could have hit him anywhere and it could have missed him by a foot, Mike. Barmy wouldn't have intended to do that.
Did you believe that anything goes on the football field? Is that your credo or not?
No.
No?
No. Not at all. Not at all.
Do you see yourself as in your footy days as brutal?
No.
No? Why does everyone else have that view?
To me, brutal is king hitting, you know, the sneak go, the dig the boots in, and one of the things that never sat well with me, I was reported for kicking one day.
That was in the seconds game, wasn't it?
Correct. Yeah. Still doesn't sit well with me.
Yeah. So let's go to that. 1976, Barry Richardson invites you to come back and have another crack at Richmond. He was coaching the seconds.
Yes.
You're playing South Melbourne, and then all hell erupted, didn't it?
Well, it was a bit of a spillover from a previous encounter, and I was playing centre half forward, and Robbie McGee must have been coming back through injury or suspension. He was playing on the half forward flank, and well, something happened, and out of nothing, I made a comment. Well, you know, don't let him do that to your bones, and someone said something, and
was there someone Tony Franklin?
No, it wasn't that. It was. I hope I wouldn't be wrong here, but it might have been Barry Beecroft.
Yeah.
And one word led to another, and it was on, and it was on too. That was I think there was only maybe one player not involved.
Is that the day you invited the entire South Melbourne team to meet you in the car park after the game?
Yes. Well, I was a bit frustrated, I must admit, because I was king hit.
You're hit from behind.
Yes.
In this game, hit on the chin. You then seek retribution, and then that's when the brawl erupted.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And you ended up going to the tribunal.
Yes.
Is that the time where there's a series of charges and you ended up with 16 weeks?
Correct.
And one of those charges was kicking.
Yes.
And that was unfounded.
Oh, absolutely. I was knocked to the ground that day, and getting up, that's when the report came. I couldn't tell you what the action was, Mike, but I've never kicked anybody in my life.
So how did you take it when there's the publicity about the alleged kick, and B, you go to the tribunal and they find that charge sustained?
No,
so it doesn't sit comfortably. No.
But I think the thing about that is too, you know who you are, and the ones who count know who you are. But there's a lot that. But you can't put those bushfires out.
Do you think that your reputation preceded you, that you were Ricky McLean, you're this tough guy, and that the tribunals acted accordingly?
I'm sure it did, Mike. I'm sure it did. It still does today to a degree. I meet people, you know, through various walks of life, through business and that, and it's almost like, you know, gee, we've had a beer with a human being, or...
Well, I tell you,
it's a bit frightening.
There's a live example of this. We had a coffee before we came on today, and I was introducing you to a customer, the cafe.
Yes.
And he struggled for your identity, and then I said Ricky McLean, and he said, "Oh, you were a thug." Correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Is that a badge of honour, or does it unsettle you, or what?
No, neither. No,
Neither?
it's certainly not a badge of honour, but, you know, I never worried about those things, and I worry less about them now. But if it was set in company that, you know, I thought it might affect, I would have something to say about that. Yeah, and I took no offence to that at all. In fact, it's colourful, it's character. He was having a laugh. I took it, but if he was serious, it would have been a different story. But you know, you can't get serious about those things.
There was another tough guy of your era named Carl Dittrich.
Yeah.
You had an on-field altercation with him at one point, didn't you?
I did.
Perhaps more than one.
Well, yeah. Not necessarily, because I was full forward for most of my career, and of course Carl was running around in the ruck and doing what he did.
Which is what, Rick?
I better be careful here, Mike, but my view about tough people were the ones who, you know, fronted up. And I always felt Carl picked his mark. Don't be writing anything in, Carl. And we were playing Melbourne in a practice match, I think the last week before the season started, and I was the recipient of the biggest golly of all time.
That's spit.
That's spit.
Yep.
And it landed on that eye and hung down there, and I had the time to pull it off. And as I did, Carl Dittrich was, you know, only a few feet away, so I just flew into him.
And do you think it came from Carl?
I know it did. Yeah, I know it.
So Carl spits on you, and you did what?
Well, I flew into him and knocked him to the ground and proceeded to jump on top of him, and I wasn't going to let go. I felt that was a pretty ordinary thing to do, and then, you know, there were some players come running in, but they didn't stop what was going on. And as I got to my feet, I turned to my right and I saw Crackers Keenan come running in, you know. And I'd known Crackers. We grew up together in Essendon. And
You weren't mad keen on him, were you?
I like him as a bloke, but
Do you?
Crackers, I liked him as a bloke. Crackers, I think, fancied himself as a bit of a pugilist. And anyway, I remember saying to him, "Well, keep coming," and I said, "And you're going down next." And to my surprise, and not many times you laugh on a football field, but and he said, "Oh no," he said, "I don't get along with the coach." He said, "I just came over here to see that you fixed him up good."
Really? Did he really?
That's not word for word, but that's
Very diplomatic of Crackers Keenan, I would have thought. So were you punching into Carl?
Yeah, I was.
Yeah.
And it was pretty obvious. I never got reported, so you draw your own conclusions there.
Why did you and Barmy get so much joy out of scaring Vinnie Waite?
He had this reputation as being a tough player, which I knew differently. And if I remember correctly, when I went to Richmond, I think the first game I played, and we played against Carlton. I might be wrong, but I think it was the first game. If it wasn't, it was obviously when that time came around, and Tommy was having meetings before the games then, and he got me up to talk about Carlton. And unbeknownst to me, that Vin Waite was a bogeyman to Richmond. And I got up there and just told it how it was. And, you know, they were in awe of what I said, and they couldn't believe the insight to not only Vin that I gave them, but a few others. And I'd say that probably almost destroyed Waite's career with them, you know, because from that point on, he was... Every time he played against Richmond, I wouldn't think he played a good game against Richmond.
So you blew his cover as the tough man?
Yeah.
Who looked after him, you or Barmy or both?
Oh, I think I started things, as you do if you make a statement, you've got to support it. But he was playing on Barmy quite a bit in those days. I think half-back, flank, back pocket. So I think Barmy relished the opportunity.
When you say started things, do you mean physically or verbally?
Yeah,
but
physically.
But didn't you say to me that you never...
Oh, I mean running through...
Oh, yeah, so nothing, you didn't belt?
No. Not through our career either. Any of the contests with Waite, no, but it was fairly well known that if he came into my territory, it was
I've sort of laboured this point about your physicality and your aggression and the way you scared players. Does that irritate you? Do you wish that more people talked about the fact that you kicked 5 goals in a final, you kicked 55 goals in a season?
No, I don't have any issues about that. I know I've done the inner search. There's lots of things I would like if I could have changed, if I'd have known more, if I'd have, you know, yada, 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 if you like. But it's more important for me to be enjoying today, for example,
Sure.
Mike.
What is your biggest fault?
Loyalty.
Is it? Can that be a fault? I wouldn't have thought so. No. Well, let's talk about loyalty. Now, at your 60th birthday party, and it was 7 years ago, Rick.
6.
Right, 6 years ago. Tuppence Moran was a guest.
Yes.
He comes under the heading of colourful identity.
Yes.
You were very loyal to him.
I was mates with Tuppence for 26 years. Some of the best years of my life. It taught me a lot about loyalty. I thought I was a loyal person, and I'm sure I was. He took loyalty to another level.
Des Tuppence Moran was murdered.
Yes.
He was part of the notorious Moran family.
Yes.
Did that trouble you that you had that link with a family that was so notorious? No, it didn't. I knew what my friendship was. I knew who that person was. You are born into a family. I never had much to do, even though I knew them reasonably well, but he was my friend. The things we did together were just ordinary, everyday stuff, just great fun, and we raced horses together. We did a lot of things together. Tell me about your reaction the day you learned that he was virtually assassinated, wasn't he? Yeah, he was. I know it's obviously painful for you. Well, it's still very difficult. Firstly, losing someone so close, but the circumstances were atrocious. I still have difficulty with that, and the person that I knew, you would love to have as your best friend, and I miss it. And knowing you, and knowing your sense of A, loyalty, and B, that, you know, squaring up when things are wrong, did you seek vengeance? Did you? No. No, that was a part of, I guess the association thing there, Mike, is one that you could be wary of, you know, but I've never been involved in any violence of, you know, the only violence of mine is football field stuff, and no, I've never been involved in that, never thought about it, to be honest. I mean, what happened was a terrible thing. What can you do? Let me ask you then about more recently the publicity surrounding Jake King and Toby Mitchell and Dane Swan and Mick Gatto. When you read that, what do you think? Are the players entitled to be linked with those notorious characters? Well, what's the cut of someone's cloth, Mike? You know, I know Mick Gatto, the dealings I've had with him, he's a pretty decent sort of bloke. You consider what you're saying, he's a pretty decent sort of bloke? Well, I speak how I find people. And the dealings and the times that I've met him, I thought he was great company. I feel sorry for those guys because it is a bit of an invasion of their privacy. You feel sorry for King and Swan, yeah? Yeah, I do. So your old club Richmond is leaning on Jake King to distance himself from Toby Mitchell. Do you think that's fair? No. No, I don't. No, I mean, I've never met Jake, but seems like a stand-up sort of bloke. I mean, you'd have to know a lot more than that, Mike, but I think on principle, you know, he's a grown man. I want to ask you about one of the Favourite pastimes of the Richmond players of your era was the annual duck shooting expedition led by Barry Richardson, Neil Baum, Craig McKellar, Neville Roberts, I suspect. You went on one of those, didn't you?
Well, I only got invited once.
What sort of artillery did you take off with, Rick?
Oh, well, I rang my beautiful mate we were talking about before, and I said, well...
It's tuppence?
Tuppence.
Yep.
I said, we're going on a duck hunt this weekend, mate. Can you get me a couple of guns or get me a gun? And he said, yeah, no worries. So I drove down there on the Friday afternoon, I think it would have been, and I walked in. There was a case there and a handgun, and I said, well, what's this? And he said, oh, that's a Magnum 45. And I said, oh, well, we're going duck shooting.
What was in the case? You know what was in the case. What was in the case, Rick?
An Armalite rifle. So I proceeded to put that in the car, and we arrived at the hotel where all the boys were, and they had a bit of, like a show and tell.
And next you're going to tell me that you'd never seen either of them before.
No, true. No.
Is that true, is it?
No, that's true. Yeah, no, that's true.
Your nephew Brock is playing at Carlton after playing at Melbourne. How's his career been?
I think he's had a great career, Mike. He struggled at Carlton from the inner sanctum, if I could use that term. It was a bit similar to what I went through, but he stuck at it, I didn't. Because he was invited there for a certain reason, these aspects of his game, and yet that turned against him. He was dropped time and time again. You know, you're too slow, for example. Well, he was slow, if you use that term, when he got there, but his capacity to get the ball and do the things that have made him such a great player, I think he's had a really good career.
Rick, you are by any definition a colourful identity. I genuinely think sometimes we lose sight of the fact that you could play this game because of the other things associated with the name of Rick McLean. But you're entitled to be proud of your contribution to football. It's good to see you, and thanks for sharing your memories.
Thank you, Mike. Pleasure.